So today's contest openers, opening on 115 snatch and 140 clean and jerk ideally. Only issue is my knee has been swollen since Thursday. Now normally my knee does swell after heavy training session, but it's normally sorted by the next day, 2 days tops. So the fact it's been swollen for 3 days isn't ideal. Either way, I'm going to weigh myself now. Hopefully I'm back up near 85 now, because obviously I say I was dieting and my scales were wrong. Also, I'm going to be doing a video in a second with my business partner Steph, who's a sports therapist, and that is a video on flat feet and issues it may cause. So hopefully, if that's you, you may find it very interesting. That's better. So as promised, here's the video on issues you may find with flat feet. Steph's going to give you the run through on my horrible feet, and hopefully you can see the problems that may incur.
So we're just going to look at what flat feet may look like. So I'm just going to go down to his feet. So we're going to start off by just looking from a frontal view. So what you can see from this position is that Aaron actually has no arch in this section here. So you can see that if I look to the side, it doesn't make an arch at all. Now, just so you know what an arch looks like, if you can just lift up your middle foot. So if he lifts up there, you can see it sort of mimics slightly an arch, but even this is not very good in Aaron's case, and he's having to roll on the outside of his foot to create that. So issues that people normally experience with flat feet, they normally would get pain off the sort of like the inside part of the bone here, especially seen in people who do long runs, like marathon runners or training in that sort of area. You normally find that you get pain in the bottom of your feet, and it usually makes your calves cramp and can give you tightness into your hamstring as well. Aaron's actually really, really flexible and he's a really competent lifter, so he's sort of eradicated a lot of these issues that normal people might see. One issue that Aaron does see quite a lot is he gets knee pain. So his knee's a little bit swollen at the moment, but you probably won't be able to tell from this video, but just sort of in this lower section it's more swollen than you can see on the other side. So the reason why we spoke about knee pain is because most people with flat feet do usually experience knee pain, and this is because where I spoke about earlier about the posterior chain, so the calves and the hamstrings being tighter, they tend to switch off, and therefore you tend to overload your anterior chain, which is your quads. Now in Aaron's case, he's a weightlifter, so he really does over-engage his anterior chain, and therefore what happens is just where the tendon is just over this section here of your quads, you tend to overload that area and hence get the pain, which is why it's just got the swelling around the area now. Other ways that you notice that people have got weaknesses is just through looking at their squats. We're just going to go through looking at a squat and different faults that we might find, and then as again lead to knee pain, hip pain, back pain, all of the above. So I was just going to show you a different couple of ways that you shouldn't squat. So the first way is usually when people rotate, and this is an issue in their hips. So as he goes down, you'll see that he'll load one side and he twists, and as he comes up, he just loads through that area. So what it's going to do is going to force overload on this side. It's going to produce weakness in this side because he's not using this leg. He's forced to overwork this side. That's going to give you pain on the outside of your knee because you're overloading it, and it's going to give you weaknesses into the hip because you're overloading this side. So what's going to happen is you're going to get a hip shift. And especially in weightlifting, your hips tighten up anyway, so we don't want them to tighten up anymore. So, and this is definitely going to create that. Another thing that is really, really common is knee collapse. So this is another thing we test for in our assessment. So as he goes down, his knees collapse in, and as he drives up, that's when you notice it more so. And you normally find that people that have got one weaker side will really sort of fall in more on one leg than the other. And again, this is going to create weaknesses onto the inside of the leg. So it'll give you too much tightness on the outside because you're producing this, and too much weakness on the inside because you're forcing too much pressure in on the inside of the leg as well. And again, this is another reason why you're going to get tightness in and around the hip, which is a big problem, and we're going to show you how we would release that later, because especially in weightlifters and people, especially like kickboxing, sort of like fighting sports, ice hockey, hips tighten up quite the most, and the release that we're going to show you is the best way to offset the hips. But also, when you're looking at where the IT band runs down to the side of the knee, it really helps offset and alleviate pressure at the knee. So you do get those sort of pains. These are good tips to do.
Yeah, so what Steph was saying in terms of the hips tightening up, as a weightlifter, I'll generally tend to split jerk with 1 foot forwards all the time. So my left hip always takes a load, this side gets tighter, which causes a lot of pain in my left hip, and then my right knee is always the one that ends up swelling. And as you said about the martial arts, you know, if you're always in one stance, you've always got the dominant leg. That's any sport where you know you're favouring one side is generally going to create imbalances. So as Steph said, she's going to show you how we would release those.
So the first thing I'll start off with is usually releasing the glutes, and as explained earlier, because calves, hamstrings tend to get a little bit tighter, you definitely find a lot in the glutes, and again because most exercises do target the hips, really good way to loosen these up and also offsets pressure onto the back as well, and just allows the hips to come through. So I'm just going to show you how to do that. So just look for trigger points into the glutes, and then you'll see how I use my elbow. Obviously don't try this on each other, make sure you get somebody who's qualified to do this, but it's a really good and effective method. So I just search around for tightness, so it's a nice area there. And then just relax for me. Then I just take his hip just through rotational ranges, and then that just helps that to release. Just give him a little bit of stretch on the quads, and then we just continue going through those. Just going to hold on to his left leg and drop his right. And then if we, in this position, if you've got too much tightness in the front of your hip, your leg will be raised up like Aaron's just showing you now. And if you've got too much tightness in your quads, then you'll see a straightening at the knee there. And lastly, if you've got too much tightness on the outside of your leg just rotate out. So if you just bring your leg in and then let it drop, because Aaron does do this quite a bit, and then let your leg drop, you see as it comes down, it just leans out to the side. And then we're going to show you in this position how we would then release that. Just drop the leg on. So where Aaron does rotate up quite a lot to the side, I just have to make sure I encourage him to pull his leg in, just so I can get a bigger stretch just through the outside quad. So I'm getting him into this position, I'll pull his leg in, and then all I do is I just apply force down on the leg. And just push up into my hand for me. And relax. And relax, all I do is I just gently push further into that range. Now in Aaron's case he's actually really flexible, so what may seem tight to the average individual isn't actually tight in Aaron, and that's just because he is flexible, so you must remember that we're looking at people individually. So all I do is to get a greater stretch on the quads for him, I just hook onto his leg and just make sure I take his knee into a stretch as well, because I'm pushing down on the hips. And I just take his knee into a stretch. And again with Aaron, he wants to turn his leg in because he wants to twist the knee out. So all I do is I'm pushing the knee inwards and I'm just turning outwards at the bottom of his foot, and that's just to give it a great stretch. So the second release I do on Aaron is just at the side of the hip here. So again, just look for trigger points just above his bone here. And this particular muscle is what really offsets the pressure at the knee. So there's one there. High pressure. Just wait for Aaron to feel that it releases, and when he feels like it's easy enough, then we'll go through the movement. So we just let him know that it is up. Okay. And just raise the leg up into my hand. Bend your neck. Get your back straight. I just pull and get a nice stretch on the front of his hip, straighten the leg out, take it back in and relax. So there's also another one that I do in this position as well, where I just come a little bit lower. So we're sort of looking 2 points around here. And this one I'm just doing in a slightly different way, and again it's a really effective release, especially on Aaron's. Just let me know when that eases up.
Okay.
And just bend your knee into your chest for me. Straighten your leg out. And bring it back in. Lovely and relax. So you can see that we're just trying to take the muscle through the full range, and that's just to get a really good effective release on the tissue. It's always best to remember as well, this isn't the be all and end all. It doesn't treat every single issue. Just because you get knee pain doesn't mean that this is 100% going to be the answer. It's just these little tips that do help. And it's specifically for Aaron, this is definitely what helps him and loosens him up and gets him ready for competitions and for his training.